Hey everybody, this is Ron again. I have a very important topic I want to talk about today. That topic is questions. Great solutions to problems start with great questions. And the greatest questions that you can learn to ask are calibrated questions. In my practice or my coaching to help supervisors learn to be the greatest coaches, the greatest supervisors, one of the foundational elements in that training, in that coaching, is learning to use calibrated questions. So, what are calibrated questions? Well, calibrated questions are open-ended questions that can be answered with a simple yes or no. They're intended to establish an action plan. And this is an action plan that either the employee or the supervisor is going to follow to solve some designated problem or meet a goal. The process reinforces the expectations, the buy-in, and the understanding of both parties that are involved in this discussion, and it establishes a future course of action towards solving a problem or meeting a goal. And you can do all this with what are called calibrated questions. Now, calibrated questions never start with words like can you do this, is this, are, do, does, and I'm going to add why to that questions, because these are closed, except for the why, they're closed-ended questions that can be answered yes or no, and you get very little buy-in or feedback from a yes or no answer. So instead of asking a question like can or is or do or are, we're going to ask our question with the words what or how. So what happens is this changes that question. For example, it changes it from something that's a yes or no to something that's open-ended. So when you have an open-ended question, you draw out conversation, you draw out ideas, you draw out feelings, and you know everybody knows what's really going on, and to some extent what's going on behind the scenes. So let's take a sample question. So here's a sample question. Does this look like something you could do? So if you ask that question to an employee, you say, okay, I need you to, what you're wanting is, you're wanting that employee to complete a project or complete a task. And so you tell the employee what the task is and say, does this look like something you can do? You're likely to get a yes or no answer to that question. So you take that question and you take this does out of it and you put a what or a how in front of it. And in this case, I'm going to use a what. What about this would work for you? So now you have a question that the guy's going to have to think about. You've generated a question that forces this person to start this thinking process. He or she is going to have to think through this and give you a thoughtful answer. They're going to say, I don't see any reason, something like, I don't see any reason why we can't do this, or I can't do this because I'm on vacation that day, or whatever it is. But you're going to start a dialogue that you can build on to solve whatever problem it is or meet whatever goal it is that you need to have. So that is a simple example of a calibrated question. Now, I'm also going to interject here another topic, and that is a topic of using the word why. When you're coaching employees, working with employees, generally you should just take that word why out of your vocabulary. The reason is that when you ask a why question, it often results in a feeling of defensiveness or starts a conflict or confrontation, because it places the recipient of that question in a defensive mode. And when you're in a defensive mode, you're more likely to be confronted, and you're just not going to have a constructive conversation if you start off that way. So we need to turn those kind of questions around too. So here's an example of how you might do that. Okay, here's a question. George, why were you late to work again today? You ask that question, George is going to get defensive. It may even eventually come to a confrontation. That is not constructive, and it's not going to help you fix George's problem. Actually, George has to fix George's problem. You don't. So let's take that accusatory question and let's make a non-accusatory question about it. So here's the non-accusatory version of that. George, I noticed you clocked in late today. What can you do for me to ensure that you're going to be here on time in the future? So notice that the rewording of this simple question avoids that whole challenging, avoids that whole confrontation, avoids that whole accusative thing, and says, okay, George, we have a problem. How can you help me solve this problem? What can you do to help solve this problem? It accomplishes two things. It avoids this defensive confrontation situation, and it puts the solution, the plan for the solution of this problem and the execution of that plan in George's hand, not yours. So, back again to the general topic of calibration questions. Here are some examples, what I think are excellent examples of calibrated questions for you to think about and consider. Number one, here's a question. You could ask the employee, what part can you play in meeting our team's goal of 100% conformance to schedule? What can you do to help us stay on schedule? The question puts the ball in the employee's court. The employee comes up with a solution. The employee is going to be responsible for executing that solution. But there may be things you can do. So here's another question. How can I support you in meeting this goal? There's the how question. You might get some feedback. Well, you could help me adjust my schedule, or you could have somebody else do this so I can do that. You're going to generate some things to think about. Number three, here's a how question. How do you think we can solve this problem? We've got a problem. George comes in late. George, this is a problem. How can we solve this problem? That's an example. Here's an excellent question that supervisors should be asking. What skills do you have that we're not currently utilizing in your job? In other words, what else are you able to do for us that we're not taking advantage of? That's a really great question. Here's another question. What about being at work on time is challenging to you? I guess in my history I've dealt with a lot of people who couldn't get to work on time, so these questions come up. So what about being at work on time is challenging? Why are you not on time? Oh, that word why, let's don't do that. That's an example of, it takes a while to learn this. Number 6, are you on board with this new plan? Well, excuse me, that was an R question. Okay. Here, let me reword that R question. How will I know that you're on board with this plan? You've worked with an employee, he's come up with a plan and a solution that he thinks can make work, and you're going to support. So how you want to reinforce that. Now, here's a question that reinforces that. How will I know that you're on board with this plan? That is a great question. Put an asterisk by that one. What part of this plan causes you the most concern? If you're talking about a plan to meet a goal or change a behavior of an employee, you've got to have a plan. You establish a plan, and you're going to talk about it. Well, what about this causes you the most concern? Here's another one. If you're working on a goal and you're giving a guy with a project and he's got some deliverables or some things you want him to do, he says, oh, how are you going to communicate this to the rest of the team? Another question. What metrics are you going to apply to your plan? You've got a plan. In many cases in manufacturing, you need to have metrics so you know that you're on track to meet your plan and your plan is accomplishing whatever goal that needs to be accomplished. And the last one I have here on my list is, you got a problem, call the employee in. You don't do accusatory, you don't do whys, you don't do can, is, do, does, those kind of questions. A simple question. How do we work through this problem? You've got a problem. How are we going to work through this problem? You ask the employee that question. They are going to have to come up with a solution. They are eventually going to have to implement that solution, often with your help. But you as a supervisor are supposed to be managing and supervising your team. You're not supposed to be doing everything yourself. If you've got a team of 5 people, you've got 5 people with ideas in their heads that can help solve a problem. You're just one person. You can lead your team and lead them all at the same time. But if you try to push your employees by being the boss, you can only push one person at a time. Now, which one of those plans do you think is going to work the best? The best plan is a plan where you are the leader and you lead the team to get things done. So, that's about all I had for that. Remember, very important, I'm going to try to put this little statement at the end of my little short talks. Remember that great managers, great supervisors are the people who know how to get things done and get things done. But the really great supervisors, the really great managers, they're the ones who know to get everybody on their team to get things done. So with that, I'll say goodbye and thank you. There will be a slide at the end of this that's got my contact information if you want to get in touch and talk about stuff. I always like to talk about stuff with folks. So you have a great day and thank you.